In our previous video, we got Python installed. Specifically, we installed version 3.8.1 of Python, and we saw that if I just typed in Python at my command prompt, it's going to run the version that I already had installed on my Mac 2.7. So if I want to run a specific version of Python, I need to specify it. Let's get out of this version by saying exit. By the way, exit, that's a function. And a function has to begin and end with an open and close parentheses. So I'll do an open parentheses, close parentheses, and press enter. Now, if I want to run some version of Python 3.8, I'll say Python 3.8. And we can see that I'm now running version 3.8.1. And we're now sitting at the Python Interactive Interpreter. And I love this environment because I remember back in college when I was learning to program in the C programming language, I would have to write a program, I would then compile it, and then I could run the executable that I had compiled. But Python is super convenient. We get to give a command, and it executes right away. For example, I could do a math function. I could say 2 times 2, where the multiplication symbol is the asterisk. 2 times 2, press enter, and it tells me 4. Or I could print a string. Normally, when you're learning a programming language, the first program you write says, hello world. Let's do that. I'll say print, and this is a function, so I do an open parentheses, and hello world is a string. It's not some sort of a number. It's not an integer. It's a string of characters. So I'll say open quote, hello world, exclamation point, close quote, close parentheses, and we'll press enter, and it says hello world. However, there is another interactive interpreter that I actually prefer to this. Instead of going to a command prompt and saying Python followed by the version, we can go into what's called the IDLE programming environment. IDLE, IDLE, that stands for Integrated Development Environment. And in addition to giving us an interactive interpreter, IDLE gives us some color coding. It's going to help us keep all of our open and close parentheses and open and close quotes correct when we're doing a really complex function, because we might forget to close a quote, for example. We'll get some color coding to prompt us about that. Now, to run version 3.8.1 of IDLE, I first need to get out of this. I'll say exit, open and close parentheses, and then we can say IDLE 3.8 and press enter. All right, we're sitting at the IDLE prompt now. This is an interactive interpreter, and I've already gone in and said file, new file, because what we're going to be doing in this video is, after we demonstrate that we can give commands at the interactive interpreter, we might want to create a file full of commands, and then we can save and execute that file. That's going to be helpful when we're doing more complex programs. Maybe we're prompting the user for input, or we're reading information from some other external file. But first, let's just check out this IDLE interactive interpreter. Let's do that hello world that we did before. I'll say print, and it's a function, so I need to do an open parentheses. And notice it gives me some syntax help as I do that. And I'll do an open quote, and notice it's in green. And when I close it, it's going to stop being green. That's going to tell me that I've closed my string of characters. And I'll say, hello world, exclamation point. And now I'm going to do my close quote. And when I type the next character, the close parentheses, it highlights all that to show me that the function is complete. And when I press enter, it comes back and says, hello world. Now, let's say that we wanted to write a program. We could go under File and say New File. I've already done that. And we could write a program here. For example, I could say print, open parentheses, quote, hello world, exclamation point, close quote, close parentheses. And I could save this. Let's do a File, Save As, and I'll call this hello world. Now, if I want to run this, I could say run module, and the output is going to show up under the interactive interpreter pane. So I'll say run module, and it comes back and says, hello world. And again, creating a separate file is a good option when we have a more complex task we're trying to do, where we're maybe prompting a user for input or reading information from a file, or we want to output information to a file. We could write a fairly complex program. For example, when we're doing a program that's going to do some network configuration, we probably want to write that inside of a file. By the way, one word of caution here. Sometimes we have the temptation to just break out a text editor, any old text editor, and write our program in that. For example, if I wanted to use the text editor that came with Mac OS, which is just called TextEdit, and I opened up a new window and I typed in print open parentheses, open quote, and I said, hello world, exclamation point, close quote, close parentheses. That looks maybe okay, but it's really not. If I copy this and I paste it underneath my previous command, look what happens. Suddenly, hello world is not in green. What's going on? Well, notice when I typed it in using the idle program, it gave me straight quotes. But when I use my text editor, it actually gave me an open quote and a close quote. They look a little bit different than the straight quotes. We need to be using straight quotes. This program would fail to run. So we need to make sure we're using a text editor that's going to give us straight quotes. And some text editors are designed with programming in mind, and they're going to give us color coding and all those helpful features that we get with idle. But just be careful and don't run just any text editor that might give you the wrong type of quotes. Now, in this video, we've seen how to get into an interactive interpreter at the CLI or in the idle environment, which gave us the benefit of some color coding. We saw how we could create a Python file that we could then execute later. And finally, we cautioned you about using a text editor that might not use straight quotes.